What is good, everybody? Hello, Juliana Page here. We do something exciting on Wednesdays every week. It's called hashtag Ask Juliana. Hashtag Ask Juliana. I don't really know how we do that. I don't know. You get it. But essentially what I do is I make my email available for folks to email questions or concerns that they have about a particular area of their life or something that's happening that they want to break through or they need some clarity around or just some good orderly direction, some wisdom. Help me, right? Just give me some help. Give me some support. So the common question that was coming up through what I was seeing this past week was this idea around controlling things. So it's kind of a statement like, help, I can't stop controlling things, or like, help, I'm recognizing that I'm a control freak and I just can't like tone it down. I can't make it stop. Like I have to control things. I have to have a plan. I have to have things in a predictable way. I've got to stay super organized. I got to stay out ahead of things. I've just got to have it figured out. And I like can't stop, right? And it's driving people around me crazy. And I feel like anxious all the time. And I just can't chill. I don't know how to turn on the chill, right? So the first thing that I would say to that, which you might not think is funny, but I think it's funny. So get a sense of humor. But isn't it better to be a control freak versus a out of control freak? I mean, if you had to choose which one you were going to be, which one would you want to be? I'm just saying. But here's the encouragement in all seriousness that I do have for you is that you can tone this down. You can turn this totally around, but you've got to be courageous, meaning be willing to get uncomfortable and to feel uncomfortable, which is the biggest part, and be willing to know that there's something beautiful on the other side of walking through processing emotions. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but you can stop being a control freak by doing something different. But you can only do something different if you recognize what's driving that behavior. There's a motive behind that. There's a lot of energy behind that if you hadn't noticed, right? When we have a tendency to control things, often it's highlighting anxiety or fear or something that we're trying to prevent from happening, which is really highlighting some unbelief and something funky that we got going on, right? So if you can get to the bottom of that, that's where you can really start shifting things, all right? So what this is presenting an opportunity for you to do is gain understanding and insight into your world, like literally the world that you're living in every day. What is going on in your headspace? What is your emotional home, right? Like, what is it like? What is it like living with you emotionally? Like, where are you at majority of the day? What are you vibrating, right? What are you vibrating internally? And then what are you sending out into the world, right? Someone were to tune into your station, what would they hear and experience, right? And then what is just like going on in your heart? Like, is there some unprocessed things there that need to have you take a serious look at and to actually process so that they don't keep coming up, right? Because things will keep coming up until we do something about it, until we recognize it, until we process it and can properly deal with it in the now. We will keep bringing things from the past into our future if we don't deal with them now, right? If it comes up, that means it's still something that's up for us and that we need to deal with, okay? Now, I want to encourage you and let you know that you do absolutely have what it takes to make courageous choices for the beautiful life that you want. You absolutely do have that. But a lot of times, especially if you are in the habit and practice of controlling things, usually that also means that you're going like full speed ahead, right? And so it's going to require in the beginning, okay, some effort, some intention to actively slow yourself down, okay? To recognize that you're not going to die, that you're safe, that your body is just experiencing an emotion and that's okay, to actually feel your feeling, right? So this can look like legit slowing down, giving yourself a timeout is what I call it, right? You know, when you're younger, go to your room, give yourself a timeout if you have to. Then think through, what is it that's going on? A lot of times it's really helpful to think about what you're feeling and actually name what you're feeling. So if you're feeling frustrated, there's still an opportunity to go deeper there. Like, why are you feeling frustrated? When did that frustration start? How long have you been noticing that? What were you thinking that led to that frustration? right? And when you can do that, then you can recognize what that is. And then maybe you can also see that the thought that you're thinking is a lie. Usually we're believing lies when we feel anxious. We're caught up in fear. Okay. And then you can pray about it because we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. So the beautiful thing is you can really engage or activate a divine exchange. So I give everything to God that's not mine or that I can't handle or that I'm repenting of. And by his grace and mercy, he renews my mind. He gives me something to think different, right? He gives me his promise to stand on. There's an exchange that happens. I give him everything that I've been hanging on to, and he gives me everything that he has, right? Beautiful. So that's an example of a process that I still practice to this day. But here's some context. When you resist anything, it keeps getting bigger. All right. The why behind this is when we resist something, we are pushing against something. We're deciding that it's not okay, and we're creating a case for that, and we're making it bigger, literally because we're putting our focus on it. We're putting our attention on it. Okay. So when we resist it, whatever it is for you, it could be a relationship problem. It could be something going on at work. It could be something that you're facing with your business. It could be something that you're facing with your kids or your family. It could be anything, right? But whenever we resist it, it gets bigger. All right. So here's what you probably know. There is a difference between knowing, like logically knowing that we need to feel and process our emotions. Like literally take a look at the energy or the vibration that we're vibrating to. What are we fine tuning ourselves to? What are we aligning with? And then what are we sending out into the world? We're experiencing a vibration in our bodies, but that's actually behind everything that we're showing up and doing. That's why we can be like, I'm good, when really you're like, you're not good, right? So check out a visual for this. You've seen like the icebergs, right? Where it's like, oh, a small, cute little iceberg, right? But then beneath the surface, it's this massive thing that can totally destroy a ship, right? That's an example of what we're like in the world. Oh, I'm amazing. And then underneath, you got all that's going on, right? Or there's like the duck example. And I was on a team back when I was in corporate that had this slogan called "Be the Duck," right? Be like calm, cool, selective, calm, cool, collected. There we go. On the surface, but then beneath the surface, you're paddling like hell, right? But that's a lot of times what we're like, right? We're telling people that we're great. We're smiling on social media. We're just, we got the life. We're just doing amazing. I'm just so great. I'm just really busy, right? Like we've got the lines figured out to put a wall between being vulnerable and just being authentic and being real, right? But we've really got a lot going on that we're not talking about, that we're not dealing with. And we keep stacking stuff above ourselves, right? And above what we know we need to face, okay? So there's a difference between logically knowing that we need to feel what we're feeling and actually process it, and then actually doing it. And why that's a struggle is because when we actually have an opportunity to do it, usually our body is in this like fight or flight mode and experience an emotion that the brain is literally thinking is going to kill us, right? So you've got to be able to start practicing some self-awareness here to release that control. So self-awareness first would be like, oh, I'm in fight or flight mode. Okay, what's going on with that? Get still, right? And then you can start processing. So some of you might be very familiar with this kind of work of feeling and processing your emotions, and others might not be accustomed to it at all. But it is essential to having a whole and impactful life, because feelings are part of the human experience, and they're part of you having a whole life, because feeling everything is what makes you human. You don't have to like everything, but feeling it is what informs how you can create and really have this beautiful, abundant life, okay? The more that you resist and push down, it's still there, right? And it builds, okay? And that leads to other dysfunctional things, because we were never meant to hang on to all the weight and the baggage that we carry, right? So when we don't feel our feelings, right? When we don't feel our feelings, right? They end up really taking over they build momentum, right? Like, I just won't deal with that. I won't deal with that. And it starts to build, right? So it ends up taking over our experiences. It ends up taking over our relationships, our work, our life, like everything, because it's involved in all that we're doing, okay? And then we spend a lot of time sometimes subconsciously, but we spend a lot of times trying to cover up our emotions and doing things to distract us. Okay, so I have some examples here, but I call this buffering. So kind of like when you're on your computer and it's like processing a lot of information, you're getting the spinning wheel. We do that too. So you could maybe take some sort of pill, or I don't even know what they would be, but familiar with this, but you could take some sort of pill to slow your mind down, or to just make it feel good, or take it to a different place, right? Temporarily though, right? Or you could have your Netflix and chips and just be chilling, right? To distract you from perhaps a business meeting or a client call or something that didn't go well, but not actually deal with the problem and now an expanding waistline, right? You could be hustling and overworking to really help you avoid or run from this feeling of insufficiency. Okay, and that could be insufficiency around money or yourself, but that never solves the actual problem that you're dealing with, right? You could be yelling at a loved one or having some random outburst or shooting them a really long text message, like just venting all of your feelings, right? Because you've really allowed all of this frustration that you've been feeling to just get deflected onto them, rather than actually looking at maybe it's because you're not believing in yourself or something's going on. But instead, you're destroying intimacy in that connection, right? So it can get messy if we don't actually feel what we're feeling. And when we avoid these feelings and we don't acknowledge them, what we're actually doing, we buffer over them, right? We're just like, whatever, and keep it moving. I'm good. We just keep going, right? Almost robotic in a lot of ways. Like we start to get a brain fog going on. We don't even know what we feel. If somebody were to ask us, we don't even know how we're doing. So we're just literally not slowing down. We're not checking in. We're not embracing our life at all, right? We're just working. We're just going a mile a minute because we're trying to cover all that up, okay? We then also do not allow ourselves to get uncomfortable enough to make change, right? Any sort of change, any sort of discomfort, any emotion that doesn't feel like whatever is your norm, whatever that emotional home is that you live in every day, when you start experiencing emotions that aren't like that, those can feel really scary and really uncomfortable to feel and to actually process, let alone if there are, let's say, unhealed traumas that are triggered and that come up and that are there, but you don't want to deal with that. So you just push that down too, right? That stuff builds up, okay? We're excellent escape artists too. We've really learned how to do that. We've really learned how to do that, okay? And we end up, here's the problem with that though. We end up creating more results that we don't want versus creating the results that we do want. We block ourselves. We literally cut ourselves off from creating the results that we do want, okay? Because we literally, when you're in this flight mode, you're shutting down the parts of your brain, like the critical thinking parts of your brain, the parts that can come up with solutions. You're shutting yourself off spiritually, so you're not even getting good orderly direction, God flowing in your life, right? So you're a hot freaking mess, right? Like you are just trying to do the best that you can. And like what you think of is like, if I can just control this stuff, then I'll be good. When really it's, I need to look at what's going on in me and shift that so that I can operate differently. Right? But that's not typically what we train ourselves to do. Okay? So living your life to the fullest and creating what you do want requires feeling. Feeling, right? Getting it up in the feels, not letting, I really want to point this out, not letting your feelings be God, because your feelings aren't God. Not letting your feelings dictate how you show up, but recognize they will unless you're intentional and self-aware about how you show up, okay? And unless you develop some ways to process in your life so that you don't just live your life reacting all the time, but you're actually able to be in your body when you're experiencing discomfort and still feel it and still show up, right? And then also have space to process it so that you can understand what's going on and be way more effective in creating impact and showing up, okay? So our feelings, what you have to know here is that our feelings are what are driving every single action that we take, all right? And the biggest lie, and I used to believe this one, but the biggest lie is that I don't have time. I ain't got time to feel what I'm feeling. I ain't got time for that. right? Like, I don't have time to slow down and process. Like, that's a luxury, like, cute. Like, I don't have time for that, right? But here's what I will say. It took me a very long time to get to the point of just like literally a breaking point. Like, I broke 2 wrists at one time, literally. Another story for another day. But it took me a minute to wake up and actually recognize you've got to slow down. Like, you don't get a prize for going fast. Like, you don't get a prize for achieving all of these things. You don't get a prize for hating yourself on the way to wherever you're going. And by the way, where are you going? Because if you keep going like this, you're going to run into more results that you don't want. Don't you think it might be worth slowing down? Just saying, right? So I literally went through a yoga teacher training at one point just to learn how to sit, to breathe, to be still, to hang out, to have nowhere else to be. Paid a lot of money just to sit on my butt, right? But I learned how to slow down, and it took a long time to do that, right? But now I'm able to do it, and it's a part of my life. So I don't regret that by any stretch. But what I will say is, if you're caught up in this belief that you don't have time, that's a lie. I will say to you now, you do not have time to not take care of yourself, to not look at what you're feeling, right? There's nothing sexy at all about having all of this unhealed pain going on and projecting that or deflecting that and just sending that out into the world, or perpetuating trauma simply because you decided that you're not going to slow down, you're unwilling to be courageous and brave and process what you're dealing with so that other people don't have to, right? Imagine that, especially if you're a parent, right? How you doing the work is the blessing. We think that we're shielding our kids in a lot of ways from not expressing emotion in front of them, maybe, right? But passing on trauma and passive aggressive behavior and some other things that happen is not good, right? It doesn't help anybody. So if you don't make time, I would urge you to consider, what kind of legacy are you creating? What are you telling people? Oh, you're telling people that it's not okay to feel what you're feeling. You're telling people that they don't have time to be human. You're telling people that there's no grace for that. Like, what are you actually showing in your example? That would be something that I would urge you to think about, right? And I will say, it can feel unsafe to process or do this feeling work. It can feel unsafe if you're new to it. For sure it can, right? But the freedom and wholeness that comes from really recognizing a lie and releasing it, and then it no longer has a hold on you. Like, you experience deliverance from that, so it doesn't keep coming up for you. That's no longer a part of your story, right? Or just the wholeness of being able to be secure in who you are, to not know, right? To live in uncertainty, but be certain that you're okay and that you're worthy, and to start telling a story about your empowerment and about your worth and about your expansion versus your pain and your trauma and all these other things that you walk through. And I'm not minimizing it. I'm somebody that's come through a lot of it, right? But God, right? But there's a choice. There's a choice, right? A lot of times we're like, just deliver me like a genie or something. And that's not how it happens, right? God is with you every step of the way, but there's often a process of breaking that stuff off. Sometimes there's instant deliverance, but there's often a process then of walking out that new life that you've been given. Who are you without trauma? Who are you without all of the suffering? Who are you without all the anxiety? Who are you without all the insecurity, right? It takes a minute to start walking in that, but it's possible. That's what you have to know. And you can have a radically different life by choosing to feel and to process what you're feeling, and then choosing to release what doesn't work for you and what's not true for you, and walking out the truth, okay? So you can show up and feel the things, feel the hard things, process the hard things, and still show up anyway. You can do that, okay? And it's a powerful, powerful thing when you start stepping into leading yourself through this process and growing through what you go through and allowing people to see your walk and to see your testimony and sharing the miracles on the way. Powerful, right? Authentic, insane amounts of freedom, right? So here's the thing. Here's a couple of things that I'll leave you with that you can do. Recognize that if you are dealing with control freak tendencies, at least you're not an out of control freak, right? But here's what you can create space for. Here's what you can start doing. So number one, create space to process. Create space to process. I know that what I started doing when this was very foreign to me, was started putting dates on my calendar that were just for me, like hours of time blocks on my schedule that were just non-negotiable me time, because that was really weird. Like as a former codependent people pleaser, like my life existed with everything that was happening on the outside of me. So to actually make time for me and be like, you're valuable, your needs matter. Oh, what are your needs? What do you need today? How are you feeling today? How can you be kind to yourself today? Like that was radical for me at one point. So it could start with that, like literally putting time on your calendar, like find a day or a time where you're going to turn off your phone. It's just like non-negotiable you time. That's one thing that you can do, and do whatever you need that day. Sometimes it's taking a nap. Sometimes it's going for a run. Sometimes it's journaling. Sometimes it's reading something inspiring. Sometimes it's listening to a podcast, but whatever it is that you need, make space for that, right? And get in the habit of that being a normal thing so that you can function as an individual, independent of anything that's happening in the world, okay? Then I would also say work with a therapist, a minister, a coach, all of them. I have what I call like an entire advisory board, right? So some of this like deep stuff that comes up, particularly in my path, it's been relational, right? So really, how can I get out of things that were passed down? How can I really understand what I'm feeling and experiencing? How can I take ownership of that? How can I create a different experience? This keeps coming up for me. That kind of deep stuff, right? Understanding your thoughts, understanding your emotions, growing in emotional intelligence, really taking care of your mental health, investing in that. I do a lot of that work with a therapist. Now, I am a coach, but I also work with coaches too, because I just believe in the power of coaching and the power of belief, and like making that literally my job, because it's opening up and expanding so much that felt impossible at one time, but it's breaking out of that, right? So I work with coaches. I also have spiritual covering. So I have that spiritual direction, because I don't want to just believe that me isolated with God is enough, right? Sometimes we have blind spots. And so I also want spiritual covering. I want to be connected with people. I want them to know what's going on, to be able to pray for me, all of that. So work with your advisory board or whoever that is. And what I have found too is when I am asking for help, or when I'm willing to finally face that stuff, God provides the coach, or God provides the teacher, whoever it is that I'm meant to be working with. The mentor, whatever that is. So that's what I would say too, is pray about this one. Then schedule time to slow down and just be kind to yourself. So start finding out, what is it that you like what brings you into that state of peace and calm and contentment, and just like, I'm okay, I'm safe. Like, what does that for you? Is it a bubble bath? Is it going to get a massage? Is it getting like pedicures? Is it getting your hair done and your head massage? Like, what is it for you that actually feels like being kind to yourself? Is it cleaning your house, right? Like, so what is it? Just find out the things that make you feel better and do those. And then lastly, remember that you are more important than your money and your business goals or your work goals or whatever you're prioritizing over you and your health. You are more important than that. Okay, so whenever those beliefs come up, like, who are you to take care of yourself? Who are you to block time? Like, who are you not to, right? When your influence matters, this is your work, right? So stop running and start mastering yourself and mastering your influence, okay? Now, if this is something that like, you're like, whoop, yep, me, like that emoji that raises her hand or his hand, right? If that is you, I have put together a course called You 2.0, and it's all about, yes, leveling up to that next level version of you, but it's really learning how to live in belief and live in empowerment and live in expansion and live in the promises and in faith and what you know to be true, rather than perpetuating pain and stories from the past and continuing the same narrative. So it's really doing some intense inner work, but it's super fun and simplified so it doesn't feel heavy, okay? Because sometimes that work that we do can feel super heavy, all right? So it is a 6-week course. There's 24 different homework assignments. There's email support. There's live videos that break everything down. And it is such a joy to be able to offer that, because I know that for sure that work can feel like you just don't even have a grid for it. So self-mastery is really, really amazing in the sense of how you start becoming self-aware, how you start discovering your inner world, how you start prioritizing that as more important than what's happening in your outer world, right? And how you start mastering your influence and truly what you're here to become and be and do and share with the world. So if that's of interest to you, you can find it over at julianapage.com. There are also coaching packages and programs over there. There's books and so many other resources to help you. So make sure that you go check that out. And then if you haven't liked, commented, followed any of those things, I would appreciate all of those. I hope this message blessed you. And until next time, stay blessed.